how does our self-awareness relate to our health in life and in ministry? In today's episode, I'm joined by Steven Chandler, pastor of Union Church and author of Stop Waiting for Permission. Together, Steven and I look at the value of being honest with ourselves about our own brokenness, our flaws, and our hangups, and how that opens the door for God to do even more in our lives and through our ministries. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to another insightful episode of FrontStage BackStage. So good to have you with us. I am your host, Jason Daye, and every single week, I have the distinct privilege of sitting down with a trusted ministry leader and diving into a topic, all in an effort to help you and other pastors like you to really embrace a healthy, sustainable rhythm for both life and ministry. We're proud to be a part of the Pastor Serve Network, and each week we take our conversation and our team creates an entire toolkit around that topic. And that toolkit can be found at pastorserve.org/network, and it's really created to help you and the ministry leaders of your church to dig more deeply into what is discussed and to reflect on that. It's got a growth guide in there, lots of other great resources. So be sure to check that out at pastorserve.org/network. Now, if you're joining us on YouTube, hello, give us a like and take a moment to drop your name and the name of your church in the comments below. We love to get to know our audience better, and our team will be praying for you and for your ministry. And whether you are joining us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, be sure to follow or to subscribe so you do not miss out on any of these great conversations. And I am super excited about our conversation today because I am joined by Steven Chandler. And Steven, welcome to FrontStage BackStage.
How's it going, Jason? Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you, brother. Now, Steven, for those who may not be as familiar with you and your ministry, can you just give us a quick snapshot of the life of Steven Chandler, Union Church, the things that you're doing, and what God is doing in your life right now?
Well, the life of Steven Chandler is a circus because I am married with 3 kids and 2 puppies. Kids are 6, 4, and 1. So it's loud, it's fun. We're having a blast right now. I have the honor of pastoring Union Church, which is in the Maryland area. We have 4 locations in that area. And then we're getting ready to launch our 5th location in Charlotte coming up this January. So we're holding on for dear life. We're having fun and not getting a lot of sleep. So it's a good.
That's awesome. That's so good to hear. Now, one of the things that you've also done recently, like you don't have enough going on in your life right now, is you have written a really fantastic book called "Stop Waiting for Permission," and in that book, and you and I were talking a little bit about this book. This book is written for a wide audience, but tell us a little bit about kind of the heart and the thought process that you were having actually as you were putting this book together.
Definitely. So I became the senior pastor of my church in 2011. I was 23 years old. I was single. I'd never been to cemetery. I mean seminary. A little preacher joke. And the church, it was a church that my dad had pastored. It was probably about 50 to 60 people for 15 years prior to me becoming the senior pastor. To make a long story short, we relaunched a church connected with a phenomenal church planting organization that kind of walked with us, and the church grew for 3 years straight. After those 3 years, we were about 400 people, and we just stalled out. We could not, it didn't matter how well I preached, didn't matter how horrible my message was. People came and people left, and we never grew. And I got so discouraged. I began to have thoughts of, man, is this all I've got? Have I hit my ceiling? Maybe I was never called to be a senior pastor, and we should become a campus of another church and all those type of stuff. So long story short, I tried to give the church away. I went to a big church in town and said, hey, we could be a campus. I'll come on staff and all this other good stuff. And Jason, I couldn't even give the church away. You know, you got a bad church when you can't even give it away. And in hindsight, I know it was God that was keeping me where he placed me. And I now know that there was a work inside of me that God needed to do before he could do a work through me. Long story short, I connected with some pastors of churches that were ahead of us, and I began to learn and realize the things that I was doing wrong, and that it wasn't just pray and trust God, but you actually have to have skill in building the church. And from that point, it was 2015 to 2018, we saw our church grow exponentially to the point where in 2020 we were named the fastest growing church in America. And then since then, our church has since doubled. And the heart behind this book is I know that there's so many people, but particularly pastors out there that are contemplating quitting, that are asking the questions of, is this all that I have in me? Is this the ceiling? Is this about as far as it's going to go? And my prayer is that through my struggle, through my frustration, and through my pain, that somebody else is encouraged to know, keep going. Your best days are ahead of you. God has so much more in store for you, but it's not worth sacrificing your marriage, your health, or your children over striving for what you see is next.
Man, that's so good. And I think that resonates with so many of us in ministry, because we can all have that sense, you know what I mean? Because in ministry, we're doing great things for the kingdom. We love God, we love ministry, we love people. I mean, that's why we are doing what we're doing. God's called us into that life and into that world. And yet we can over push ourselves. And
Absolutely.
that's one of the things that I love in the book that you kind of share, and you try to help us kind of process through this idea of what does it really look like to give God our best. And one of the things, Stephen, that you share is that as we look at giving God our best, we need to look at the state of our hearts. Right,
Absolutely.
because it really starts there, and that we often view our circumstances and thus our life through a couple different lenses, and there are a couple primary lenses that you share, that we use, and one is kind of like an anxiety tinted lens, right, where we're looking through it and we're looking fear, we're seeing things as problems, we're seeing negativity and things sort of like that. But then you also talk about this, this hope tinted lens. And as we look through that lens, we see, goodness, we see opportunities, we see faith. And, Stephen, we would think as pastors and ministry leaders, we would think that the state of our heart would be really oriented toward hope. All right, Jesus is our hope. And although that is true in many circumstances, in many cases, it's not always true. Sometimes that anxiety can really sort of seep in. So, Stephen, can you share with us a little bit? Why is it that we get caught up sometimes in anxiety over hope, fear over faith, and then what can we do to make really that shift in our perspective?
I love what Paul said. He said, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. Now, that sounds like Paul failed his anatomy class because you don't have eyes in your heart, Paul. You have eyes on top of your head. But Paul said, I'm not talking about anatomy, I'm talking about spiritual health. We don't see life through our eyes, we see life through our hearts or through our life experiences. And unfortunately, we were all born into a broken world. This broken world has damaged our hearts. So before we were a pastor, we may have grown up in a single family home or with an alcoholic parent or a parent that battled with depression. We might have dealt with rejection at school or these life things that wounds our heart. And a lot of times you grow up in your passion for God, your love for God, you go to seminary, you discover your calling, but your heart was never healed. So next thing you know, I'm pastoring from a position of I've been told my whole life I'm not good enough. And now the fear of not being good enough is driving me. I wish as pastors we could be honest and honest enough to say that as much as we love God and our heart is broken for the lost, it is impossible for any of us to have 100% pure motives. By the fact that we have a sinful nature, we have impure motives as well. I want to prove to people that I have what it takes. I want to prove to myself, or I want to be somebody. I don't want to be a loser. I want to be or whatever it may be. And the sooner that we acknowledge that our hearts were wounded before we ever became pastors, and that our motives are never 100% pure, then we can begin to address the reality of our heart, bring it to Jesus, bring it to trusted colleagues, and start the process of healing so that we can lead and have aspirations and ambition from a healthy place instead of from an unhealthy place. Here's the other thing: all trauma doesn't just come from our childhood. Some trauma comes from that trustee who planted the church with us and said that they'd be with us till the end. And then they got mad at us and they marched out the door. And it wounds us because that was somebody that was close to us, that we cried with, cared for. And wounds just happen as we go. And if we don't have a practice of bringing our hearts to Jesus, to professional counselors, to trusted pastors, and maintaining our health, then we're going to find that we're going to be leading from an unhealthy place. I would not advise pastoring a church single on my worst enemy. I wouldn't say it's difficult. I'd say it's impossible.
Mm.
I did it and I survived because I had my parents close by and I had people that were able to safeguard me. But I'm a little bit glad that I pastored the first 2 years single because Jason, I was not healthy. And I'm so glad that my wife wasn't susceptible to that season, but I wasn't sleeping. I was working 80-hour plus weeks. I was doing it in my own strength. And to make matters worse is I was getting results. That's what's dangerous. When you're leading from an unhealthy place and you're actually getting results, there's no motive to examine your heart or to actually back off and then get into a healthy place. And thank God I had people around me and were like, bro, you're not doing well. You're not in a healthy place. And they were able to get me on track. But it's a reality, I would say, for all of us, not just some of us.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it's important because being sure that we step back and realize that none of us are exempt from this reality. We all have an upbringing, a background. We all have a narrative that we bring into the work that we do, that God's called us to do.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, Stephen, about the fact of having a community of sorts around you. You had people who cared about you, who cared more about you probably than they cared about your ministry, actually, right? And
Absolutely.
so and I think that's vital and so very important. As leaders, one of the things that you shared and is this kind of this idea that we need to pay attention to what is fueling us.
Mhm.
Um, and you kind of touched a little bit on that in regard to your first few years there in ministry, and um, what exactly is fueling us is not always on kind of the front stage of our lives, right? It's
Mhm.
not always something that everyone can see it. It's often on the backstage. It's hidden away in our personal lives.
Yep.
And Stephen, one of the things that you say is the wrong fuel, and I love this. You say the wrong fuel always takes more than it gives. So let's get really practical. Let's kind of go backstage, Stephen. What are some of those unhealthy fuels that we might not even realize that we're relying upon in our ministries?
Yeah. So fear is a big one. Fear of failure, fear of not being enough. A popular phrase today is imposter syndrome,
Mm,
where people feel like I'm a fraud. Everybody thinks that I'm this great man or woman of God or whatever it may be, but I know the inconsistencies in my life. Pride is another major fuel of I want to prove to people that I am somebody, that I am valuable, that I have something to offer the world. Comparison is another major fuel of man, I don't want to be in second place. I don't want to, it's rare that you're going to find a pastor of a growing church that's not competitive. It's the competitive nature in us that causes us to push and to drive things forward. But if we don't take that God given nature and submit it to the cross and heal from those negative influences, it will cost us more than it gives us. For example, if you're fueled by failure, you're afraid of being a failure, you most likely will become one of two things: either a workaholic or extremely passive, and someone who does not take risk. Now, if you're a workaholic, then you're going to push and work to a level that can't sustain a healthy marriage. You're going to work to a level that can't raise healthy kids. You're going to work at a level that can't keep your physical health intact. And then what happens? Your church grows and your marriage doesn't. Your church grows, and next thing you know, you're on an operating table with open heart surgery because you've neglected your physical health. Or your church grows and is the expense of the relationship with your child.
Mm.
Now, one of the things that I discovered is that the unhealth in our heart is lived out in different ways based on our personality. And we demonize the over aggressive personalities. Oh, he's a workaholic. Oh, he's arrogant or she's arrogant, always talking about themselves, or they're always trying to one up somebody. But another personality, that same fear, manifests as passivity. So, no, I'm not a workaholic and I don't neglect my kids and I don't neglect my marriage and I don't neglect my health and all that. But also, I'm not maximizing my potential. I'm not having the impact that God's called me to have because fear has paralyzed me. It's kept me from trusting the leaders around me. It's kept me from living by faith instead of by sight. And we can demonize those people with the aggressive personality, but in the eyes of God, the negative fuel is still taking more from us than it's given to us. Now, what's the positive fuel? Everything that the enemy creates is a counterfeit of what God had for us. So what's the fuel that will push me and keep me motivated? Hey, here's the problem, Jason. Like fear will get you motivated. Like if you want to be better than somebody, you're gonna wake up earlier, you're gonna go to, but and because those things, work ethic will bring good results, it can be tempting as, well, I know it's not healthy. I like the results that I'm getting. I'm telling you, God's way always brings better results in the end. So here's some healthy fuel: passion. What's the passion that God's placed in your heart? Oftentimes, passion is disguised as frustration.
Mm.
What is it about the world, about ministry, about the kingdom of God that frustrates you? Hey, that frustration is actually a problem that God has put you on this earth to be a solution to. So Jesus was frustrated by them selling and turning the temple into a marketplace. And we saw that frustration manifest when he braided that whip. And I mean, he got passionate and you would have thought that he was angry. And it gave the same velocity, but it came from a healthy motivation. Purpose is another great motivator and a healthy motivator. We all know Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Hey, God plans your life. He but gives talents and ability inside of you. And there's a purpose that you have here on earth. And when you latch onto that purpose, it is going to be such a motivator and a fuel. The last one is one, and Jason, I'm going to be too honest, and hopefully I can help some pastors in my honesty. The last motivator has to be eternity. It has to be, I want to give my life so that people do not live a life separated from God for eternity. Paul said it this way. He said, I want to take hold of that in which Christ took hold of me. I am blown away by the fact that he shed his blood for my freedom. And I want to give my life for other people that they can connect with that same freedom. All right, here comes the honesty that's going to get me in trouble. Um, how much I care about lost people ebbs and flows. Sometimes my heart is broken for some people, for people who do not yet know Jesus and need the hope of Jesus Christ. And sometimes I'm not thinking about them at all. If I said I could care less, I mean, y'all would judge me, but you're already judging me, so it's all good. If we would be honest, we don't always have a heart that's broken for the things that breaks God's heart. But because I know that, and I know that it needs to be a motivator, I'm constantly examining my heart. I'm asking questions of, hey, when's the last time you shed real tears over people who do not yet know Christ? Oh man, it's been 4 months. Ah, I got to get in God's presence again. I got to get in God's word. I got to begin to pray, God, break my heart again for the things that breaks your heart because I'm becoming calloused to the thing that you create, that you put me in a ministry in for the first place, and that is supposed to be a healthy motivator.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, Stephen. One of the things that as you were talking there, I was thinking of this idea of honesty, and I appreciate your honesty, brother. Um, but getting to a place where we can really be honest with ourselves about what our motivations are on any given day, because like you said, there's an ebb and flow. I think for all of us, we all would resonate with that in ministry. Like there is an ebb and flow to kind of our passion about certain things, our heart for certain things. And if we're honest and able to say that is a reality in my life, I think this is an incredible gift, Stephen, because if we can say that is a reality, then that opens the opportunity for us to, as you said, examine ourselves,
Yeah.
check in with the Holy Spirit and say, hey, just like David said, check my heart, and if we're unwilling, to admit that we do have cracks, we have flaws, that we are broken, then we're never going to pause
Yeah.
and do that examination and open our heart up before God and say, okay, God, do your work. Where am I today? So talk to me a little bit, Stephen. What does that look like in your life as an example? Like what does that process of examination look like in a practical way?
So I'm gonna give you like nice little preacher joke. Denial is not just a river in Egypt.
There you go.
But it's a place that we often live. I think about, when the Pharisees came to Jesus and Jesus said, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. And they said, we've never been in bondage a day in our lives. And I always laugh when I preach that because I ask the church, have you ever read the Bible? Like they're in bondage in the beginning, they're in bondage in the middle. And when they told Jesus they weren't in bondage, they were in bondage to the Roman Empire at that moment.
Right.
It's difficult to acknowledge where I am. But the reality is God can't heal us, deliver us, set us free, move us forward until we say, this is where I am. This is what's going on in my life. So here's how I do it for me. When you're driving a car, there's gauges on the dashboard that tell you the health of the car. It tells you how much gas is in the car. It tells you, is the fluid cooling the engine or is it overheating? It's telling you the speed that you're going. All these gauges you're supposed to be paying attention to them to say, hey, this is a healthy pace at which I'm driving. And if something goes wrong, a check engine light is going to pop up, a tire pressure light is going to pop up. We should have gauges in our life that let us know something's off. Hey, I'm not really sleeping well at night. Something's off. Hey, I'm having big wins. This is a big one for me and my personality. I'm having big wins. People are getting baptized. People are getting saved. I have a new book coming out and I don't feel like celebrating. I'm not pausing to thank God and say, wow, that was amazing. It's just on to the next. When I see something I've prayed for come to pass and I don't celebrate, I just go on to the next. That's an indication that something's off in your heart. Like that's a check engine light on the dashboard. I'm short with people in my relationships. I'm reading my Bible and praying, and it's going through the motions, but I'm not really receiving anything for it. I am you would put me on a scale of emotional, and 10 is very emotional and 0 is not emotional. I'm somewhere in the negative. Like my wife will tell you she could count on one hand the amount of times she's seen me cry and all that other good stuff. So for me, if I'm in church worshiping or I'm worshiping in my quiet time during the week and it's emotionless, there's not tears that are streaming down my face at least once a week, I know, Stephen, your heart is getting hard.
Hmm.
So you're getting desensitized to the presence of God. These are just some of my gauges that help me say, hey, you're off. And then I have patterns of something simple that a lot of my pastor friends don't do. I Sabbath. I have 1 day a week where I don't sermon prep, I don't check emails, I don't take business calls. For me, my Sabbath is Friday, because I work on Sundays. So, Sundays is
Right.
my Sabbath. But I am religious. My staff knows from 6 PM on Thursday to 6 PM on Friday, you can't get him. He's not signing anything for the bank. He's not checking emails. You can call me, but don't let it be about work because I've got to have a pause moment in which I take rest for myself, for my family, and I let God do what He's going to do. I am mandatory vacation every year. And I just started doing it where it's not 2 weeks, but it's 4 consecutive weeks where I step away. Here's what fear will say. Fear will say, if I step away from that church, it'll decrease. People won't get saved. The money will go down. Leaders won't have vision and all that other good stuff. Jason, you know what happens every time I step away? Dude, the giving goes up. People get saved. People get baptized. And I start looking like, man, maybe I was the problem the whole time. Maybe it'd be a great church if I didn't come back. But I think it's just a supernatural confirmation from God
Right.
of I'm choosing to use you, but
Yep.
I don't need you. Don't forget, it is God who adds the increase, even if you're watering and another person is planting the seed. So having those patterns of knowing when I'm getting into an unhealthy place, and then having strategic sections of your year where you stop, pause, and evaluate.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. I love that analogy of the gauges. It's so just it speaks to really what we need to be doing. And it's that idea of self-awareness, that oftentimes we can get so caught up in ministry, so busy, so pushing that we're not checking the dashboard. We're not looking at those gauges. We're not making sure we're self-aware. I know that you've shared also this idea of community, people around you, so that whenever you are kind of, not, glancing out the dashboard, you have people in your life that can, hey, let's check in. So talk a little bit about how that community around you works to provide just a healthy, loving, caring way to have a sustainable rhythm of ministry.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just stick with the car analogy.
Okay.
If you're smart, you'll take your car in for oil change at least every 3,000 miles, 10,000 miles, whatever it is. And they're not just going to change your oil. They're going to check your water pressure, your tire pressure, your antifreeze, and all. You're smart enough to know that you can't evaluate your car by the eyeball. And we should know if we value our soul more than our cars, it should be the same way.
Mm.
You should have trusted people in your life that they're allowed to check your health level. So for me, I have what we call overseers. It's a board of senior pastors that I'm accountable to. They're responsible for my life, for my marriage, and for my integrity. And they have the authority and they do call me almost on a monthly basis. And they love me. They, like you said earlier, they care more about me than they care about the success of my church. And hey, how you doing? How are the kids? No, how are you really doing? How's marriage? How's kids? How's this? How that? All right, cool. Well, my wife is going to call Zai. That's my wife's name. And I better get the same answers.
Right.
So if you got something to tell me, tell me.
Now's the time, right?
And this board is made up of brothers and fathers. Fathers are the ones I'm intimidated by. Brothers are the ones that have my back. And you need both in your life. You need fathers that hey, they will correct me. They'll sit me down if need be. And I'll honor that. But I also need brothers that I can say, hey, I'm not trending in the right direction. And I need an arm around the shoulder, not a foot in the pants. I need an arm around the shoulder of, hey, man, you're doing better than you think you are. I remember one time I was calling someone on that board and a spiritual brother of mine. And I said, man, I want to do this, but I'm afraid that it's going to come across as arrogant and it's going to look self-promoting and all that other good stuff. And he said to me, he said, Steven, arrogant people don't ask those type of questions. So simply by the fact that you're worried about it and you're thinking about it means that arrogance is not the foundation of it. Now, some people may perceive it as arrogance, but don't worry about them because they don't know your heart anyway. And it just brought such a peace in me. And it was what I needed from a brother.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love to see how you kind of knit those pieces together. The self awareness piece, the surrounding yourself with people who care about you and your family, and that's one of the things that I think, unfortunately, we see um, in the church today. All too often, people aren't in community; they're isolating themselves. All too often, they're not self aware. They're not checking in. They're just pressing ahead. So, Stephen, when we're thinking about this idea of, giving God our absolute best, allowing God to do a work in us, like you said, we got to allow God to work to do in us before he can do a work through us. What are some just kind of encouraging words that you would like to share with your brothers and sisters who are, we're all on this journey together. We're all, we maybe have competitive spirits, but we know that our competition isn't one another. Our competition is the enemy.
Yeah.
So what are some encouraging words that you'd like to leave with other pastors and ministry leaders?
I'll make it short. I'm going to give a quick rebuke and a quick encouraging word.
Good.
Never have they ever given out the gold medal in a race for a fast start. They only give out the gold medal for a strong finish. And I think those of us in ministry, especially, I'm young and I'm on the front side of my journey. Sometimes we're so consumed in starting fast that we don't give a lot of thought to our finish. And if you start fast and you don't finish, you're disqualified. And we have to say, hey, as much as I want this church to grow today, me still being in ministry 30 years from now matters more. So let me put into my life the safe accountability is only as valuable as you allow it to be in your life. And when you see it as this is vital for me finishing strong, then you'll use it and value it in the way that it needs to be valued. Here's the encouragement. If you are breathing oxygen, you have not yet maximized your potential. There is I don't care if you are a 68-year-old pastor getting ready to pass your church on to somebody else, your best days are ahead of you. There is so much more that God wants to do through your life. And if you're not seeing the progress and the growth that you want to see, hear me. That's not God's lot for your life. That's not God's. Paul said, hey, I'm going to go with Christ, or I'm going to continue in fruitful ministry. There's fruit that God has for you. So let's do the heart work. Let's do the character analysis. Let's learn from who we need to learn from so that we can maximize the potential that God has placed inside of you. But trust me, there's more ahead of you than there is behind you.
I love that. What a great word, brother. Man, Steve, it's been so great to have time with you today. Your heart and your spirit and your love, your passion is contagious. It just pours out of you. I just love to see Jesus in you. So thank you for making the time to hang out with us on FrontStage BackStage. Real quickly, if people want to connect with you, connect with your ministry, obviously, if they're interested in finding your new book, what's the best way to connect?
The book is anywhere books are sold. Steven R. Chandler, Steven with a PH, like in the Bible, StevenRChandler.com. You could find everything about me. And then same thing, Steven R. Chandler on Instagram is where you'll find me wasting my life. So any of those things.
Awesome, brother. And for those watching along or listening in, we will have all the links for you to connect with Steven and with his newest book, Stop Waiting for Permission. And you can find that at pastorserve.org/network, where you can download the toolkit for this entire conversation, things for you to reflect upon, for you and your team to grow more deeply in the things that Steven and I have been talking about and what Steven has shared. So again, pastorserve.org/network, you'll find all of that there. And Steven, man, it has been an absolute blessing.
Hey, Jason,
what encouragement. Yes.
Thank you for all that you do for pastors, for the kingdom of God, the impact that you're making. You may not even be able to see it, but you're impacting so many lives and advancing the kingdom. So thank you for all that you do.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. God bless you.
All righty.
Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, FrontStage BackStage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Daye, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.